Hello, everyone. Welcome to the live Week 12 waiver show on Rotoviz Radio. I'm Kevin Szafraniec, and as always, I'm joined by Blair Andrews. Blair, how's it going?
It's going great. Another fun week for waivers, especially with some important bye weeks coming fast and furious. So it's a good week to be paying attention. Hopefully you're not. Hopefully all your teams aren't already dead, and you can still benefit from doing the weekly waivers. But yeah.
Yeah, and that was one thing that, going into the article today, looking at, there are 6 teams on bye this week, and then there's no teams on bye in week 13, and then there's 6 more teams on bye in week 14. It's like, why don't we just spread this out 4 teams over the next 3 weeks? Like, really?
Yeah.
It's not really. I mean, obviously, the schedule makers aren't worried about fantasy players when they're putting it out of the schedule. But at the same time, I don't know. You have a heart. Come on.
Right.
In the week's most, I guess we could call it relevant news. I don't think it's really a shock to anybody, but it's the magical Tommy DeVito is coming back in to replace Daniel Jones as the starting QB moving forward. I don't know if, I just don't know it. Obviously, we knew that this could have happened because of the clause, and he's got Jones has an injury clause in his contract, kind of like Russell Wilson had last year. And if he were to keep playing and get hurt, they'd be on the hook to keep him on the roster. So it seems pretty clear they're going to cut him after the season, which isn't a shock to anyone with the way he's played. So does this move torpedo the value of the entire offense, or is there nowhere to go but up? I mean, it's really, I'm kind of torn between this because Tommy DeVito, but then you look at kind of Daniel Jones and it's like, yeah, but they can't really do much worse.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that probably Daniel Jones is better than Tommy DeVito for the players in this offense, just generally. But with the way he's been playing, any change is probably a change that does nothing. But if anything, it would be slight boost for perhaps some of the top targets. Maybe you see DeVito kind of targeting Neighbors a little bit more, focusing in on him a little bit more. Maybe you see them try and rely more on the running game, getting Tyrone Tracy in. So it could end up being a benefit for some of our fantasy favorites, but I don't think it really has any bearing on the offense.
It does. It's just about nothing. Just some stats that I dug up while I was getting ready for the show. So Daniel Jones, so he's been the QB4 in expected points per game, but he's been the QB 29 in PPR per game. Just to tell you kind of how bad it's been this year. He's QB 71 in FPOE, and then as far he's been through 10 games. He's been a QB1 in 3 games, QB2 in 4 games, and a QB3 or worse in 3 games. So he's really not doing much for anybody.
How many QBs have even played in a game this season? Like QB 71 has to be pretty close to the bottom.
I say, I'm assuming 72 QBs have played this year.
Right.
No, I mean, he's probably last, I would guess,
Yeah.
So it's just kind of put in perspective, like how bad he's been. Obviously, he still has the rushing thing, and that he was getting 4.9 rushing EP per game, and just overall, just bad. And then even if we go to just to kind of look at what DeVito did in his time, this was last year when he was out, meaning Jones. So he played in 8 games. He's a QB1 in 1 game, a QB2 in 4 games, and a QB3 in 3 games. Is he anybody? Are you interested in DeVito in like super flex leagues at all, or is he just a starting quarterback body, or do you think like Drew Lock's going to come in here as well? Like, I'm kind of surprised they didn't go to Lock, off the rip.
I think in super flex you have to be interested in any QB who's starting games. So I'm not, I wouldn't necessarily avoid him, although unless you're desperate, you probably have better options. But yeah, I mean, he has this 25-point game he put up last year. That was when Washington's defense was one of the worst in the league, so maybe not very indicative of what he might do this year.
Yeah.
And yeah, there is obviously a pretty high likelihood that DeVito ends up getting benched before too long and we see Drew Lock come in. So from that perspective, obviously he's not somebody that you have a lot of confidence in starting, but if you need the points, he's going to be on the field. I think in a lot of superflex leagues, there are a lot of superflex leagues where they kind of nerf the QB points. And in those cases, it might make sense to not even start a quarterback in your superflex spot if you're having to choose between DeVito and a skill position player, for instance. But I think you have to take a look at him if you're that desperate.
Yeah, say it's all green going forward too. There's no red on his strength of schedule, at least, or on the Giants, I should say, regardless of who ends up starting. At least they have. I'm guessing just by look, this is just a single team, but I'm guessing if we flip this to include every single team, I'm guessing they probably have the best. Yep, they have the number one strength of schedule for quarterbacks for the rest of the season. So
by quite a long ways too.
So I guess there's worse plays you could have than trying to run out one of the Giants starters, especially obviously they're upgraded as well this year with having neighbors there. And
Right.
Theo Johnson, you could maybe say he's a upgrade over Daniel Bellinger, who I think, or I guess it would have been I can't think of his name, the guy that retired this year, tight end.
Darren Waller.
Yeah, I don't know why I was slipping my mind, but yeah. But even looking at DeVito's highest AYAs last year, Hodgins was the top one, Bellinger was second, Slayton, Wandale, and Saquon. So I think that does signal some decent things for one, maybe Theo Johnson at tight end, because obviously we know how these younger guys generally tend to come in and target them. And then even Tyrone Tracy still probably, like, all those shorter targets, I think probably be good. And most likely he'll just pepper neighbors as well. So as long as he can get the Peppers neighbors part of the equation right, I'd be happy. That's all I'm really looking for out of DeVito going forward.
Yeah. When you pulled up the strength of schedule, it had that Tampa Bay game coming up first, which looks like the best one coming up. Considering how good that matchup is, are you tempted to start DeVito over some guys that you might have otherwise, like somebody who's got a tough matchup this week who otherwise you would normally have higher? I can't even think of who that might be, but
we could jump into a little later down in the show sheet. We could just jump to him now, but Caleb Williams is somebody that I kind of had brought up and I wanted to talk about a little bit after he started. He had I guess you could call it kind of a bounce back week. He's maybe the sort of person that we would be looking at, even just if we pull up the whole entire weekly heat map. So we're looking at somebody like Stafford. Stafford's playing Philadelphia. I think I'd still go Stafford over DeVito. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that one I think is close. I do think playing the matchups at quarterback often makes a lot of sense. But it's hard. Stafford's obviously got those weapons. He's done it before. We have more confidence in him probably, just in general. So it's hard to bench him for a guy like DeVito, but I'd be tempted to.
Yeah. I think I'd still go with Stafford, especially he's been on a pretty decent hot streak since Kupp and Puka have been back. So I think really.
What about Sam Darnold?
See, now that's a good one because he did come back and have a good week last week, but at the same time, he's been more Sam Darnold-y as the weeks have gone on.
Yeah.
So I think that as they're playing Chicago, I'd probably. That's rough.
Yeah.
Let's say, why not? Why not throw Tommy DeVito?
Yeah, exactly. Have some fun.
Yeah, have some fun, especially if you're playing spoiler in your league. Maybe it'd be fun to throw Tommy DeVito out there. Try to ruin someone. Have you being a bad team and Tommy DeVito go and kind of ruin somebody's season. Why not?
Yeah, right, for sure. Just looking at like the list of quarterbacks who have bad matchups, I probably am starting DeVito over everyone at the bottom until you get up to maybe Jordan Love,
Yeah.
maybe even Jalen Hurts.
Wow. I
Like
think that's a little that.
maybe I start DeVito over Love.
Yeah.
Definitely not
That's
over Hurts, but
okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. I think I still would still have to go Love over that, just because
yeah,
Love has so many weapons that it's obviously it's a bad matchup, but at the same time, it's like when you have that big of a collection of weapons, I think it kind of mitigates some
yeah,
of the bad matchup, because you can go in so many different
right.
directions where a lot of teams don't have that amount of depth that they can rely on. So it's easier for teams to shut them down.
Yeah.
So still a good exercise to go through the Tommy.
Yeah.
Who would have thought in 2024 we'd have Tommy
Who would you start
DeVito
Tommy
versus
DeVito over?
Matthew Stafford, or I guess Jordan Love isn't
All right, not
the mainstay.
don't start him over Love, but
Yeah.
anyone below that on the list,
Yeah. Uh,
except for maybe Stafford.
yeah. Another guy has a good matchup all the rest of the year. I think he's number 4 in quarterback strength of schedule, and has been a staple of our conversations and of the waiver article, is Bo Nix. We talk about him a little bit every week, but it finally seems like, all right, now's the time. This might be last call on him in the waivers, because he's currently owned in 69% of ESPN leagues and 49% of Yahoo. So most likely he won't be eligible for the article next week.
Mhm.
But since week, or he finished this past week as the quarterback 3, and he currently ranks as the QB 7 overall for the whole entire season. He's been mentioned like every week on the show for the past month, been a staple, like I said, uh, is like the way he's been playing. Okay, so he is definitely a waiver wire gem. I think we feel like that's safe to say, but
Yeah,
could he be going all the way up to potential league winner at this point?
yeah. I mean, I think you have to have him in the conversation for. Well, I mean, he's the QB 7 on the season, so if
Yeah,
you're looking at talking, if you're thinking about who you're going to start in week 12 and the rest of the season, like he's got to be one of the names on the top of the list. There are only a few guys who you'd probably prefer to start over him. So yeah, waiver wire gem is an understatement for sure.
Yeah, and then the biggest thing that I've kind of noticed, especially over the last 2 weeks, so he's continued to be, a good quarterback, but he had the rushing upside that he had has not been there. Like literally, he's had I think 3 carries for. I know he's had exactly 0 yards in the last 2 games. He had one game
Mm,
with -5 against the Chiefs, and then last week he had 5 yards rushing, and that's it. Where he
okay,
was averaging like at least 6 yards per game just as a rusher earlier in the season, and now that hasn't been there, he's still kind of balancing himself out uh, as being, an overall quarterback, and especially
right,
with the weapons that he has, or like I said, maybe the weapons that he doesn't have, it's still pretty impressive of what he's doing.
yeah,
So, and then I say even added on top of that, like you said, he does have the fourth best schedule for quarterbacks going forward. So it's like it just kind of seems like wheels up for Bo Nix.
definitely. I mean, obviously there are some of the elite guys who you aren't taking out of your lineup to put Knicks in if you've got Josh Allen or Lamar or Hurts. But I don't know. Do you start Knicks over Mahomes?
I think you have to, honestly. We're
Yeah,
at that point.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's been like that for a while too. I think that's not even it's not
Not
even
even a
something
hot
that's like
take.
it's not
Yeah,
even really a hot take at this point, because it's just, I mean, I guess the proof is in the pudding at this point. And something that you brought up on the week 11 instant reaction show with Hassan and I, and it kind of dismissed it early, but like thinking over it a little more, do you think that Knicks's trajectory uh kind of has him maybe edging out Jane Daniels as the offensive rookie of the year?
well, they do seem to be moving in opposite directions, Daniels and Knicks. Daniels over the last 2 weeks has not looked like the same type of fantasy quarterback that he did earlier in the season. But I mean, the upside Daniels gives you, and kind of the way he was performing earlier, I think still gives him the advantage there for him to come out so hot.
Mhm.
I'm expecting a bounce back from Daniels. So I do still have Daniels ahead of Nix in terms of if you're redrafting this class, but I think it's a lot closer certainly now than it was earlier in the season. And I think, Nix is the clear number 2, right? You have him above Caleb Williams probably at this point.
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to.
Yeah. So is there a big tier break between Daniels and Nix? Maybe not anymore.
Yeah, maybe I think that's maybe the gap is closing, but the way that Daniels shot out of the gate, I think, is going to kind of endear him more. I mean, we're just talking about people voting and the kind of turnaround that team has seen. I think he's got all the hype going for him, but at the same time, I kind of just looked into, since week 5 is when Bo Nix had his first QB1 week. So since that time, Nix has been the QB4 overall and averaging 21.5 points per game, while since then Daniels has been the QB12 overall and averaging about 18 points a game. And we also have to take into account that there was that game against Carolina that he went out early and they were already smoking him, so they just left him out. So
right.
it's like he kind of gets, or this meaning Daniels probably kind of gets dinged for that.
Yeah.
But even overall, just averaging 231 yards passing is Nix versus 206 for Daniels. The rushing's not that much different either. Nix has had averaging 6 rushes for 26 yards a game versus Daniels averaging 7 rushes for 38 yards a game. Like, it's not really, it's coming. Nix is kind of pulling away from him as a passer and closing the gap as a rusher as well. So
right.
I don't know. Like you said, I don't know if he can actually catch up to him because Daniels is so hot out of the gate. But I mean, I think when you AB him, the gap between the two is not as far away as probably the most people kind of are thinking about right now.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, they're not even that. If Daniels had come in with kind of the profile Caleb Williams had, where he was younger, number 1 pick, had been good kind of throughout college, that probably gives him an even bigger advantage. But when you look at the two guys from a prospect perspective, Nix and Daniels, they're not that dissimilar in terms of their overall profile, their numbers, both older guys that have went to a few different colleges. So yeah, I think definitely think they're closer than probably, well, maybe now people are thinking they actually are pretty close, but I don't know. I'm not quite ready to flip flop them, but I think we're having that conversation is not crazy.
Yeah. And Arturo asks if he should hold Jaden Daniels or try and send him and a wide receiver for Lamar.
Depends on who the wide receiver is, I guess.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, yeah. A little more context would definitely help on that one because. So, just saying, what if it's Jaden and like a standard, mid-range wide receiver too, like your wide receiver 20 on the year? Do you think that's enough to get it done, or would
Calvin
you be
Ridley or something?
Yeah. So maybe there's a weekly starter, but not, top class sort of guy.
I really don't like making quarterback trades to try and improve your team. I think that tends to backfire. So I would probably not do that unless the wide receiver you're giving up is like really not helping your team. Like if it's someone who you are not starting or would almost never start.
Yeah, if we're looking at, the wide receiver 18 through 22 this year, we're talking about Lad McConkey, Khalil Shakir, Juwan Jennings, DK Metcalf, who's missed some time, Stephon Diggs, who's obviously isn't there anymore, Cooper Kupp missed time. So I guess if we're looking for guys that have played consistently, we're talking about like Lad McConkey, Khalil Shakir, like that level of player. and Jaden Daniels. I mean, I think especially, and then obviously there's so much team context that goes into this, like who are your other wide receivers and da 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 da.
Yeah.
But like say if you have the wide receiver depth to do it, I think that's definitely not the worst way to go, especially considering even when we look at it more, Baltimore has the 4th worst quarterback strength of schedule going forward, as opposed to Washington has the 13th best. So you're looking at 13 versus 27.
Yeah.
Or 28. So
Right.
it's it's a hard one just for the fact that, I mean, it's kind of like a give and take.
Right. Yeah, that's tough. They both play Philadelphia again this year. They both have the bye coming up in week 14. That's tricky. I mean, there's some, like, Lamar's a little bit more matchup proof than a lot of quarterbacks are. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't, that wouldn't deter me too much from picking him up, but it's definitely something to consider. And if you have to give up a pretty valuable wide receiver to make this trade happen, then I probably would not do it. But
Yeah.
I do think Lamar, despite the difference in strength of schedule, I do think Lamar is an upgrade. It just depends
Absolutely.
on, it's just a question of how much.
Yeah. So Nix and Stafford made up the top tier of today's article for the quarterbacks, but both are close to 50% owned on both platforms, meaning ESPN and Yahoo. And so another QB who isn't really on that level, but who still barely made the cut because he's highly owned, is Caleb Williams, we talked about earlier. Things looked a little better in the team's first game with Thomas Brown as offense coordinator, but they still have far way to go. Is Williams still a player we should be avoiding, or do you think he's worth taking a shot on with kind of like these improvements that we've seen in his just one game, obviously a small sample size?
Yeah, no, I think he's probably worth taking a shot on in the right matchup. Again, we keep coming back to it, but it does make a difference. They play Minnesota this week, right? So what looked earlier like a tough matchup is actually turning out to be one that teams have been able to exploit. So I think you can probably take a chance on that and play him this week and see how that goes. But yeah, I am pretty hopeful that we're going to see some improvement from him and from that whole team over the rest of the season.
Yeah, and it's not like he took huge leaps in week 11, but at the same time, there's some things that changed that obviously were vast improvements. The biggest thing was the rushing. He was only averaging 4 carries for 26 yards through the first 10 games, but last week he had 9 carries for 70. And he just seemed like he got the green light to just basically take off, basically at will, which could over time open up the passing game if teams are more afraid that he's just going to continuously take off. They might bring less pressure and kind of give him more time in the pocket. So this might be something that could evolve. Not saying it will, but it could. And he also, so in this first 10 weeks, he only had a 60% completion percentage, but in this one game, he had 74%. And a lot of that looks like it was due to his ADOT dropped by over a yard. So he was averaging 8-yard ADOT. And then just in this last week, it was 6.8. But at the same time, his yards per attempt went up. So he was averaging about 6 yards per attempt. And now he was averaging 7.5. And I think a lot of that was them basically hitting DJ Moore. It seemed like DJ Moore, his role changed. He was pretty much like a ton of end arounds, a lot of screen passes close to the line of scrimmage, and let him do work after that. So I mean, it's nice to see them kind of changing the roles for the guys a little bit to maximize their strength. So I guess it's promising is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I think so. And I definitely think probably if he's an actual threat to run, that opens up things that make it easier for him to pass the ball. Yeah, obviously completing more passes is going to be pretty huge for yards per attempt. So I think that's pretty big for them to put him in spots where he can make throws that are more completable, as it were. So yeah, I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I don't want to backtrack too far, but Arturo kind of did update us on his wide receivers. So he's got Pickens, Neighbors, and Justin Jefferson. And I wouldn't,
Keep Daniels.
yeah,
If you're
and
talking
that's
about
the thing.
giving away one of those guys,
Yeah,
then
unless you're
keep
getting
Daniels.
something, unless you're getting something back with Lamar.
Yeah.
But I think you're doing pretty well. Especially we talked about Pickens on the show on Sunday night, and he's quickly turned into one of my. I don't know if I should say favorite guys, but like he's a fun to watch guy.
He is, yeah.
Uh,
He's got well, yeah. He's a fun player to watch for sure. And
yeah,
I don't know. He's got that Stephon Diggs energy in a lot of
yeah,
ways, but that's also fun in some ways.
yeah. He's definitely fiery. So going to running back, the Pickens are starting to get pretty slim. Hank Bigsby kind of surprised me seeing that he was eligible to make the article today because he's actually available in over 50% of both ESPN and Yahoo leagues. So I mean, just as a comment, I said I would just urge everyone to check your league to see if he's available because he's got an ankle injury right now, but Jacksonville's also on the bye. I don't really
Mhm.
think that ETN is the top running back in that backfield anymore, and it kind of surprised me that people are so quick to dump him, unless his ankle injury is more than I feel like it is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if Bigsby's available, and especially if you have a league that you can throw him on IR, I'd do that. I
Yeah.
don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
No, that's true. I mean, yeah, Bigsby does look like the guy they want to use the most. I do think his kind of touch profile makes him difficult to start in some leagues where he's not getting that receiving work at all. Like, so you're relying on him to either score a touchdown or pick up a lot of rushing yards. So that does, uh, in some ways, limit his floor. Obviously, we've seen him put up some real duds this year, but it also kind of limits his ceiling in a way in that he's not able to get those receptions that can be so valuable. So, um, yeah, I guess I'm a little more skeptical maybe than you are about Bigsby, but he definitely has looked really good when he's running the ball well. I mean, I'm skeptical of this whole Jacksonville offense, especially. I don't know how much longer Trevor Lawrence is going to be out, but yeah.
Mac Jones is not the answer you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, based on the way Lawrence is playing, I'm not sure he's the answer either, but
Yeah.
certainly it's not Mac Jones. Yeah.
Yeah, and say Bigsby does not offer anything in the receiving game, but it's just more of if you're looking for legit touches, that's something I brought up in the article today. It's we're to the point of the season that you're
Yeah.
essentially just looking for somebody who's going to touch the ball with any sort of frequency or projectable volume at this point. If you're
Right.
trying to get somebody off the waiver wire, and I think Bigsby offers you that, so I guess it's more of in the context of the other guys that are available. Like, yeah, he's probably the guy that you want to go pick up if you see him there.
Right.
And besides Bigsby, the I guess the name to get excited about in the top tier of today's article may just be Cam Akers. Gus Edwards is up there as well, but I think Cam Akers has kind of displayed more. So that just kind of tells everybody that we're the point of the season that we're
Where
at
we
right
are,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, this is where we are. So does his recent production make him a viable spot start with the current barrage of bye weeks that we're seeing?
I guess he's got double digit carries in the last two games. Didn't look really that good on those carries.
Mhm.
But he is getting that work. Hopefully, he'll turn one of those into a touchdown. I think that's really what you're hoping for with Akers, that he'll some uh, give you some touchdown upside because he's not getting the yardage, less than 3 yards per carry in each of the last two games, only 3 targets over that span. So it's not an ideal situation, certainly for Akers, but he does give you a little bit of upside. And when you're comparing, you know, him to Gus
Yeah.
Edwards,
Yeah.
maybe it becomes easier to go with Akers after he got all those carries the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes down to Aaron Jones just really has not been playing well, to
Yeah.
put it bluntly.
Yeah.
He's still like almost doubling up Akers and touches over the last 2 games or last 3 games since Akers, joined and started playing for the Vikings.
Right.
But over that same span, Jones is only averaging like 9.9 points to Akers' 8.2 on double the attempts, rushing, but like across the board, he's pretty much doubling up Akers. The receiving EP is pretty close. It's 4.6 to 3.2 per game, but Jones is averaging negative 5.7 FPOE per game, where Akers is pretty much are just coming out like even. So a lot of it just really has to do with Aaron Jones. I don't know. He's not a spring chicken. He could be wearing down a little bit. I mean, we see him blast out of the gate on his revenge tour after, he wanted to prove to everybody maybe that the Packers were wrong for getting rid of him. But I mean, there's a chance he's not a guy that's, always stayed healthy during his career. So, and he's getting older. So I don't know. I mean, there's really, not to say you get all that excited about starting Cam Akers at this point in his career, but if you're desperate, he's definitely seems like he has some projectable volume. Obviously, getting 11 opportunities per game is good, where Gus Edwards is getting like 8 carries in his last couple of games since he came back. So
and no targets.
Yeah.
I think given the state of the waiver wire in most leagues, Akers is probably one of the best options available. I know in one of our FFPC leagues, we're starting Edwards, I think, on one team this week, and I'm just looking, looking at the waiver wire to say, oh, there's got to be a better option than Edwards out there, but there really isn't. So if Akers is available, you probably, I'm sure your team could be in the same position as ours.
Yeah.
And he would help.
Yeah. The second tier of today's article consists of just pretty much, guys that have a little bit of standalone value, but mostly contingent upside plays. 2 names that I found the most interesting that kind of moved up from recent weeks is Jalen Wright and Roschon Johnson. So Wright seemed to pass Raheem Mostert as the RB2 in Miami this past week, and Johnson saw an increase in usage in Thomas Brown's first game as the Bears OCs. Do you feel like either of these guys have a chance of increasing their standalone value, or like to the point where maybe they could even be, flex RB2 type starts?
I do think that both of them could. The way it works in Miami is we kind of saw a glimpse of it last week, where that offense started to look like they were putting things together. Granted, it was against the Raiders, but they started to look like the Miami we were hoping we were going to get. In that context, for both Achane and Wright to have value is not that far-fetched. So I do think that is a distinct possibility. In Chicago, maybe Roschon takes over the backfield from DeAndre Swift. I think we've been talking about that. It seems like all season that might happen, and maybe not the most likely outcome, but definitely within the range of possibilities, I think.
Yeah, because I was on the record earlier in the season as saying that, I wasn't super impressed with DeAndre, and since then he's gone on to make me look stupid. He's consistently done well, so I'm ready to bury that take. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't really believe in the guy as much, but they gave him a big contract. He's getting the work. He has looked good. But Roschon hasn't looked bad. He seems like he's their preferred goal line back. And he also picked up, in the first game with Thomas Brown, he got 10 rushing attempts to Swift's 14. Rushing yards were not there. Swift blew him out of the water. They both got a rushing touchdown. Swift only led in targets 2-1, and then they both scored a touchdown. So Swift scored 16.4 PPR points. Roschon had 11.1. So not huge, gap. 41 snaps for DeAndre to 30 for Roschon. So and that's a big jump from what he was seeing. Earlier in the year, Roschon was seeing like 5 carries for 15 yards per game. So just kind of like that's his average since he came back from the injury list. So, he saw a big bump. Maybe Thomas Brown's onto something. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess maybe. Swift's 16.4 fantasy points were enough to make him an RB1 on the week. So kind of gives you a sense of the state of the running back position, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, I mean, somebody who drafted a ton of Jalen Wright this offseason, super excited to see him. But like neither him nor Raheem Mostert has done well with her. Like the one thing
That's
is
true.
okay. So
That's
Jalen
true.
Wright's getting a bigger workload and everything, but he didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
So it seems like Achane really is the guy there. But at the same time, we have seen glimpses of what Jalen Wright can do when he has gotten some opportunity. It just maybe seems like last week against the Raiders wasn't, it's obviously wasn't his best game,
Hmm.
but at the same time, it's good to see him ascending. But obviously, we definitely want to see a little bit more. Definitely need to
Yeah.
see a little bit more from them before we, even think about throwing him into starting lineups.
Yeah, right. This is more of a long-term kind of not even a long-term play necessarily, but like we're holding out hope for some future week, which may come in 2025 or maybe never.
Yeah, absolutely. The list of available wide receivers again lacks any really surefire options this week, but Christian Watson and Elijah Moore, they headline the section because they both had top 15 weeks at wide receiver in week 11. So when looking at the both of them, do you prefer like the big play upside of Christian Watson or the volume floor available with Elijah Moore?
I guess I would probably prefer more, and that is partly because I do think there's still a chance that we haven't really seen, like Cleveland hasn't decided who their wide receiver one is going to be, and probably Moore doesn't have the best shot of actually becoming that, but he is getting some volume. Uh, Tillman kind of came back down to earth. Judy had a big game, but we've seen him put up a lot of duds. If Moore can start to put it together, maybe he becomes kind of Winston's preferred target down the stretch. Uh, Whereas Watson, I think, is kind of blocked from having that kind of role. So in terms of long-term upside, I guess I would say give Moore the edge, but obviously Watson can put up, a multi-touchdown game almost any week.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where the team context, I mean, each fantasy manager's team context, not the players
Right.
themselves,
Right.
really plays a huge role in it because if you're looking for the weekly floor, if you just need somebody to slide in that's going to get you, double digit points every week, uh, like Elijah Moore's your guy since Jameis came in as starter, averaging 13.6 PPR per game. He has been a little bit inefficient. He's negative 1.2 FPOE per game, but his average stat line is 10 targets, 60 or for 6 catches, 60 yards, and a touchdown every 3 games. So
Mm,
not so bad. Where as opposed to since Watson came back from his high ankle, he's averaging 10.6 PPR. He has 2 wide receiver 2 weeks. He has 3 games where he's a wide receiver 3 or worse. So he's really just really the upside sort of play that we're
right.
looking for.
Right.
Um, so it really is like, what do you want? Do you want the spike week upside, or do you want the guy that's going to get you points every week? And usually we go wider range of outcomes, but in this case, it seems like more. I mean, he kind of not say he
Yeah.
offers you both, but he offers the point upside, but not the big play upside. I think is the best way to
Yeah,
put it.
that's right. That's right. But when you're looking at their profiles, like if you pull up the Watson's chart in the NFL Stat Explorer, it looks almost identical to Moore's. And I mean, the thing that's notable is that he doesn't have any bigger games than what Moore had. So it's not like in a single game context, he even does give you a higher upside, or at least this season he hasn't. So
Yeah.
I think if we're thinking of their ceilings as about equal, then Moore obviously gives you the higher floor and is the way to go there.
Yeah, and he's also available in pretty much all leagues. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he's about like 10% owned in both ESPN and Yahoo, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, so he's obviously somebody that can be had. Where Watson, I know, is right above, right at the clip of 50% in each one. Moore is owned in 9.4% of ESPN leagues and 8% of Yahoo leagues. So
Yeah.
The better guy is probably available in your league. If you need wide receiver help, like go snatch him up right now.
Yeah.
We did talk about this a little bit earlier. Concerned about Neighbors' rest of season outlook with DeVito as his QB. I don't know if if he gets the memo. Yeah, if he gets the memo, just throw the ball to Neighbors over and over. We should be
right.
fine.
Not any more concerned than you were with Daniel Jones as his QB rest of season. So, yeah, I don't think it's an upgrade, but it's not really a downgrade either, based on the way Jones was playing.
Yeah, and I mean, especially we got those big games from Neighbors before he went out with concussion and missed those 2 games. But
Right.
since then, he's been like pure volume play, pure just get him a bunch of targets, like empty targets. His numbers don't look bad as far as target market share and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's been no creativity or no, real like juice to his numbers. It's all just been volume, like empty filler sort of targets, which sucks. So I think Tommy DeVito can do that.
Yeah.
And I say a lot of the times too, the backup quarterbacks really, really don't even try to go away from their number one. They'll just hone in on that number one and just go to them over and over again. So, I mean, that's the hope, I guess. Wishful thinking on that, but
Right.
say it really doesn't feel like it could get much worse at this point than what Daniel Jones was doing.
I mean, yeah, right. Neighbors has had double-digit targets in each of the last 3 games. Not quite at the level he was at prior to the concussion, where you had like the 18 target game, 15 target game, but still, I think you're just hoping that eventually those targets turn into yards and touchdowns, and it doesn't look like that's any less likely to happen with DeVito than it was with Daniel Jones. So,
yeah. So the highlight of the tight end section today was actually Jonnu Smith. I mean, he's been mentioned every week for probably the last 3 or 4 weeks because he's actually been coming on. But he officially passed Hunter Henry PPR points for the season last week, despite playing 1 less game, which is pretty wild. I wouldn't have expected that. So Smith currently sits at tight end 8. Hunter Henry's right after him. In the article, I still claimed I prefer Henry rest of the season, depending just basically based on his role being more stable in the Patriots offense. So do you feel like we should be buying into Smith's recent production being sustainable? And if so, should he be prioritized over Hunter Henry?
Yeah, it's a good question. I do agree that Hunter Henry's role is probably more predictable in New England's offense, but I also think that Miami's offense is more potent than New England. So, even though Smith might not have you might project Henry for a few more targets, you could reasonably project Smith for more touchdowns going forward. So I do think you could make a good case to prioritize Smith over Henry. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's another one of those team context sort of things where Hunter Henry does seem to give you the floor. Because since week 6, Hunter Henry's had 4 tight end 1 games, 1 tight end 2 game, 1 tight end 3 games, where this big stretch that Jonnu's had is essentially it's 2 games. He's had a 22-point PPR game and a 28-point PPR game, which he had last week. And in between that, he's had 2 tight end 2 games and 1 tight end 3 game. So, and the one thing that I thought was kind of wild digging into it since week 7 is like when Smith started taking off. So he has a 21% target market share, while Tyreek Hill has a 19% target share and Waddle has a 13. And some of this was before Tua came back, obviously.
Right.
But I just kind of looked at like where he started taking off, and it's not like when Tua came back, he just disappeared to nowhere. Like he's still been getting consistent volume.
Yeah.
But it's just more of like, with those guys in the offense, he just seems like it's probably be more hit or miss with Jonnu, but obviously, like you said, it's a better offense altogether. So his ceiling's obviously higher. So if you're looking for a wide range of outcomes, Jonnu's probably your guy. If you just want, the steady Eddie sort of, okay, I'm going to take my 10 PPR points a game and be happy with that every week, then Hunter Henry's probably your guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Although I think also Smith has been at least close to 10 PPR points most recent weeks. You know, Henry does have a higher floor, it looks like, at least recently, but not by much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that ceiling, obviously, that Smith has been showing. It's so hard because, like, the rest of the season, he could put up all duds and we wouldn't even think that was like unusual. And
Yep.
so with these kind of tight ends, yeah, they're pretty hard to predict, but it does seem like at least Smith's chances of scoring a touchdown in Miami's offense are a little bit higher than Henry's in New England.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So that's about it for today. We're about out of time. I really wanted to get some Theo Johnson, Jatavian Sanders talk in there for the second week in a row, but they're pushed all the way down. So we'll get to them at some point. It's even more of just like a bridge over to dynasty stuff that we're starting to think about. I'm sure a lot of people are interested in that sort of stuff too, as the season's winding down. But we'll get to them.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say I'm actually starting Jatavian Sanders in a tight end premium league this week because I can't even remember why I have so many players on bye that I have to start him against the Chiefs. I'm kind of hopeful, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think overall, I know that both of them have super favorable schedules as far as tight end goes for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
So it looks like Theo Johnson's around like 7th or 8th, and then Jatavian's like 10th, 11th as far as strength schedule. So they both have some decent schedules going forward. Say there's a lot worse people you can do, but for anybody that wants to dig deeper, like I say, all the stuff, I pull up tons of data through our tools. So anybody that's interested in kind of taking deep diver on anybody that tickles your fancy, we got data on them in like 100 different ways. You can put together huge, basically databases of your favorite players just with the tools that we have, and all the way from their prospect profiles all the way to where they're at now. So if anybody's interested in kind of taking deeper dives or getting to people that we're not getting to on these shows, we are currently having a 3-month subscription discounted for $25.99 off the normal price of $45.99. So 20% discount. We're pushing upwards of 50%. Anybody that's listened to the podcast, here's all the stuff we talk about, all these tools. This would be like the perfect time, especially home stretch. Crush your fantasy league playoffs. We plus just on top of the tools, every week we have articles about everything you want to know about. Tight end streamers from Neil Dutton, defense special teams from Ross Durham. Dave's got his patching matchups. Sean's got all the RBs covered in Zero Over Universe. Blair's got more macro team level stuff and the wrong read. Pretty much everything that you need to finish the season strong we got. And then also, obviously we're going to start putting out some dynasty content, looking forward to next year in the nearish future. So, basically you're going to get all that sort of stuff in the next 3 months. So I say, what do you got to lose? $26 is nothing right at this point, right? Yeah. So I spend probably $26 on stupid stuff every day. So why not get a RotoViz sub for 3 months?
It's
right?
like 2 burrito bowls or something.
So anything else you want to mention before we get out of here?
No, you nailed it. I think in addition to the dynasty content we'll have coming up, if you're, thinking about the next 3 months and how this could help you. Obviously we've seen this year how huge some of these rookie performances are, and getting to know the rookies early, the upcoming rookies, the prospects who are coming in, kind of getting a handle on those can be pretty huge for redraft and for best ball too. So there's something for everyone.
Yeah. So anybody that's watching, please like and subscribe to the RotoViz YouTube channel. If you could also leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast app, we would greatly appreciate it. For anybody that just wants to just skip that 3-month sub, just go the whole year. If you want a 10% discount on a 1-year RotoViz subscription, enter the discount code RVRadio2024 at checkout. Thanks again for everybody for tuning in. Make sure to get those waiver claims in, and best of luck to everybody in week 12. For Blair Andrews, I'm Kevin Szafraniec. See y'all next week.